What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and what I wanted to do in this video is I wanted to do a review for Avengers 2 Age of Ultron. But what I'd like to do is get a little deep into this movie as opposed to simply just saying, hey, the movie was great, you should go see it, peace. Instead, I wanted to answer a few questions. And so what I've done is I've given myself some talking points, about 4 talking points in total, which I think should cover the brunt of some of the more significant things in this movie. And so if you guys don't want to have Age of Ultron spoiled for you, then I would suggest you guys go ahead and turn the video off now. But if you don't care, then I'd say let's continue. So I think one of the questions that a lot of people are going to have is, why does this movie exist? Why is this movie here? In the film, of course, as we know, Ultron comes into existence at the hands of Tony Stark. And if you've seen the film, there's really no reason for me to go into an explanation as to why any of that's happening. But if you haven't seen the film, then just bear with me. Or I guess if you have seen the film, bear with me for a second for those who haven't seen the film yet. But Ultron basically comes into existence when Tony Stark attempts to create an artificial intelligence that will serve as a guard of sorts. It'll basically be a self-contained army that will be able to protect the planet Earth, so the Avengers don't have to do that forever. So they can simply enjoy their lives. They can have families, different things like that. But this basically goes awry. When Ultron is created, much like a child, Ultron's curious about everything. And after basically examining all of humanity over the course of a few seconds, the entire history of humanity, what Ultron rationalizes is that the only way to really protect humanity is to protect humanity from itself. And so his argument is the classic, I guess, paradox of the violence of humanity versus humanity's desire to continue existing. And so he simply says that he's just going to eradicate humanity in its entirety. It seems to be the most rational course of action. And so this basically culminates in the film as it leads into the final confrontation with the Avengers and Ultron. Now, what we learn here is that in order for Ultron to officially be defeated, every version of Ultron has to be destroyed. Otherwise, that version can escape and produce more Ultrons. And so when the movie comes to an end, Ultron's totally defeated. Every version of Ultron is eradicated. And so as it stands now, Ultron's not there anymore. There's really no reason to have Ultron in any future movies. They could write it in, but it would probably kind of be considered nonsensical by a lot of moviegoers. And so the question is, what's the basis of this? If it appears to be a self-contained film, then why was the film made in the first place? And this, I think, is where things get really cool. What Joss Whedon is doing here with the Avengers series is he's basically following the standard of classical movie trilogies. And what I mean by that is, in every movie trilogy, we have the first film, which sets the stage. We have the second film that gives us information, and we have the third film, which is the end game. Everything comes to an end in the third film. In Avengers Assemble, in Avengers 1, we got the stage set by Joss Whedon telling us the only time the Avengers are ever going to come together is when there's some kind of massive threat, some kind of global threat that could presumably wipe out all life or destroy the Earth entirely. This is the reason why the Avengers did not assemble during Captain America the Winter Soldier. There was no reason for them to. There was no purpose in it. We had Captain America, we had Falcon, and we had Black Widow, and they were able to single-handedly take out Hydra. There was really no reason to have Thor or the Incredible Hulk or Iron Man or anybody like that. In the second films, again, we basically get all the information that we need to understand why things are the way they are. For example, in the Alien trilogy with Alien and then Aliens and Alien 3, in the second film, in Aliens, we learn where the aliens come from. We learn that there's a queen that lays the eggs. The eggs hatch, they latch onto a person, they plant an actual, like a xenomorph in the body of that person, it busts out, and the cycle continues on and on and on. In the Godfather trilogy, we learned in the second film how it was Don Corleone had risen through the ranks to become the godfather of the mafia. These are the kind of things that we had learned in those trilogies, and Age of Ultron 2, or I guess Age of Ultron, is no different. The really cool thing here is that we really have to look at what it is that Joss Whedon was doing. What he basically does is he takes this movie and he ties it into the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He ties it into Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., for example. In the beginning of the film, when we see them arriving and basically trying to defeat Hydra, when they initially encounter Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, both Captain America and Thor, as well as others, refer to them as enhanced people. And enhanced people is a phrase that we had seen in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's what S.H.I.E.L.D. referred to to as individuals who have powers or in some capacity are augmented beyond what people are normally capable of. This may seem like a very minor thing, but this is basically Joss Whedon telling us, and it was actually confirmed in the discussions among the characters from Age of Ultron, that this is not the first time they've encountered enhanced people, that the enhanced people we've seen in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. exist alongside individuals in this film, and that characters that we haven't seen yet have been encountered by the Avengers proper as they were continuing to try to track down Hydra and destroy the various Hydra bases. Now, that's a relatively minor thing, and the reason why I say that's a relatively minor thing is because the big picture here is Avengers 3, the Infinity War, Thanos gaining the Infinity Gauntlet, or I guess gaining the Infinity Stones. All the Ultron aside, all that stuff out of the way, I mean, the Ultron battles, the conflicts, Sokovia saving the city and all that kind of stuff, the most important part of this film came in about a 3 or 4 minute segment out of the entire thing, and it was when the Scarlet Witch had used her powers on Thor. There were two possibilities with the idea of Thor. The first was confirmed, and the second is kind of a theory that's running out there among those who have seen Age of Ultron so far. The confirmed thing is, of course, as we saw in the film, basically all the Infinity Stones being gathered by Thanos and then Thanos just killing everybody. I mean, that was the vision that was basically given to us. That is, as far as Thor is concerned, seems to be the case, that Thanos will gain the Infinity Gems and kill everyone. What Joss Whedon also did in this film is he confirmed what the Infinity Stones are. The big question a lot of people had is with the Tesseract, for example. If the Tesseract is an Infinity Stone, then why is it in the shape of a cube? If the Ether is an Infinity Stone, then why is it in a liquid state? What he basically told us is that these various forms of the Infinity Stones are designed that way to protect the Infinity Stones. The liquid form of the Ether means the stone itself can't be harmed. It can't actually be destroyed. The, cube casing of the Tesseract, of the space gem, basically means that that gem is protected by the cube itself, by the power within it. With regards to the staff of Loki, as we saw, it was an actual jewel of sorts that housed the gem proper. What Joss Whedon told us is that these are all stones. These are actual stones once they take form, and when they do, a person can wield them appropriately. And so what this basically did is it was Joss Whedon saying, this movie is basically a lead up to Infinity War. This is basically just establishing to us that at this point in time in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, 4 of the stones have been revealed. The Ether, which is the Reality Stone, the Space Gem, or I guess the Tesseract, which is the Space Stone, the Staff of Loki, which housed the Mind Stone, and then finally the Power Stone, which we saw in Guardians of the Galaxy. And so this is why this film exists. The purpose of this film is to basically lead us up to Infinity War, to say, here's where we stand in the Marvel Cinematic Universe with all of the Infinity Stones. And it did it in spectacular fashion. I thought this film was absolutely mind-blowing. Now, here's the next thing. I really wanted to take some time to talk about the personality of Ultron. The personality of Ultron for me is such that this version that we see in the films is different from the one in the comics, but it's also pretty cool. I liked that Ultron was basically curious about humanity. Ultron was very human in this film. He had a lot of human elements. When he first emerges, he's very curious as to why it is humanity wants to exist, but humanity is so self-destructive. He basically looks at humanity as kind of a very interesting concept, but also seems to have this idea that destroying humanity seems to be the only real course of action. He's basically doing what he feels needs to be done. And I think one of the coolest elements, one of the coolest statements made about Ultron was made by the Scarlet Witch when she said, Ultron doesn't know how to differentiate between order and chaos. He doesn't know how to differentiate between saving humanity and destroying humanity. And this, I think, was the coolest concept because, again, it basically told us that for Ultron, there's no difference. Now, in the comics, Ultron's far more ruthless. He's far more cruel of a being. In this, in the movie, Ultron felt like it was his duty. It felt like he was helping humanity by destroying it. In the comics, he's just like, man, screw humanity. Like, those guys suck. I'm just going to kill them because whatever, like, I just hate them. That's how he is in the comics. I mean, he's pretty straightforward. He's like, humanity sucks, and I hate Hank Pym, the guy who made me, and I'm just going to kill everybody, and that's that. That's basically the way Ultron is in the comics, and I like that element. But I think that while that element in the comics is really just kind of a villain of the week sort of thing, in the sense that he shows up, fights the Avengers, and goes away, and there's really not much personality to him, in the movie, he had a lot of personality, and I think a lot of that was brought to the main stage by James Spader, who was phenomenal as Ultron. But again, I guess moving on, when we talked about the two things that Thor saw and how one of them was confirmed to be the Infinity Gems, the other one I had mentioned was sort of this theory. Again, we saw that the Scarlet Witch had used her powers to manipulate, or I guess to cast illusions in the minds of people. Now, what we don't know is if these are illusions, if these are simply just things that people are afraid of, which seems to be the case, or if it's some kind of clairvoyance. Because in a lot of instances in the film, it seems as though it's clairvoyance. I mean, Tony Stark acts on his fear. He acts on the fact that he knows this is going to happen. Thor sees the visions of everything being destroyed and then basically says this is because the Infinity Gems are being gained. I mean, the whole reason why he learns the Infinity Gems are being collected is because of the fact that he saw this vision. And so we don't really know which one came first, the chicken or the egg, but it seems to me that some measure of clairvoyance is involved in this. And so when we saw Thor seeing his illusions with Heimdall and so on and so forth, I don't know about you guys, but that looked like Ragnarok. Like, I thought for a split second we got a glimpse of Surtur, and that is huge because that basically means that, like, everybody in Asgard's gonna die. And so I'm really curious to see what that means. But that, to me, I think right there was a glimpse of Ragnarok. It was a glimpse of Thor seeing everybody being killed, of seeing Heimdall being killed, of seeing all the Asgardians being wiped out, and presumably Surtur being the one behind it. But again, we don't necessarily know that. It's just kind of a theory that I have going, so I wouldn't take that as an absolute fact. But I guess the next thing here, the next major thing, and I think this is really sort of a big deal, is Civil War. One of the coolest elements that I felt was really sort of juxtaposed here, and again, this could just be me seeing things that aren't really there, was the giant crater that we saw in Sokovia. What it looked like to me was this was sort of a homage to the Civil War event when Nitro blew up Stamford, Connecticut. But rather than seeing somebody actually blow up a neighborhood, kill 800 people and 60 children or something like that, this, I think, is basically going to kind of boil to a head. The events of Avengers, we saw a multitude of destruction. We saw the Incredible Hulk when he was controlled by the Scarlet Witch in Avengers 2, just like rampaging through Sokovia and causing all kinds of violence and chaos. The level of destruction in this film was more so than we had ever seen in the first Avengers film. It was unbelievable, and it was destruction all over the place. And so I think this is basically going to be the straw that broke the camel's back. This film, the events that take place in this movie, combined with the events of Captain America, the Winter Soldier, and so on and so forth, are going to be the Stamford, Connecticut of Civil War in the comic books. This is going to be the event where the government finally says enough is enough. Like, we've had it with superheroes blowing stuff up and then just leaving it there. Because if you noticed, we saw Stark mention the, I guess the Stark rescue or whatever it is, the crew that he has that helps clean things up, but we don't know if he involved that in Sokovia. We don't know if that's a relatively new thing. We don't even know if that's something that is really like a long-term thing. Does that group go in and make sure people are okay, give them the kind of medical treatment they need, and then leave? Or does it help to rebuild the entire city? If it doesn't help rebuild the entire city, then basically what's happening is the superheroes are going into a city, they're fighting supervillains, and then they're leaving the city to its own, I guess, community to repair it, which was the basis behind Civil War. Like, governments and various groups and so on were tired of seeing the superheroes go into a city, blow it all up, tear it to pieces, and then just say, well, we beat the bad guys, and then just walk away and leave the city with the bill basically to pay for everything. And so, you know, this I think is really going to be like the big lead-up. I think this is going to be the big event. I wouldn't be surprised in Captain America Civil War if we see some reference to Age of Ultron of them saying that was the straw that broke the camel's back. That was the last thing. That's basically what did it in. The last thing I want to talk about here before I bring this video to an end is I want to talk about the Vision. I want to talk about his character. I loved the idea of the Vision. It's really difficult to make this personality-based comparison between characters in the comics and characters in movies, because in the comics they have whatever voice we assign to them. You know, their name is pronounced however we choose to pronounce it, unless, of course, we're talking about names based in existing mythology. For example, the Asgardians, which are based in mythology, or I guess Norse mythology that exists already. But, you know, characters like the Vision, his personality, the way in which he talks, what his voice sounds like, these are all elements that we throw in there. And so when we're reading these comments and we see the Vision talk, the way in which he communicates is based on us. And so to see, I guess, Paul Bettany, to basically hear him talking like the Vision, to hear the Vision so calm, to hear him so collected, to hear him so removed from emotion in terms of excitement and anger and rage and different things like that, and happiness, I think is really, really interesting. It felt a lot more like the Vision that we saw in the Vision Quest, when Vision had basically lost his soul, when he had lost the brain patterns of Wonder Man, and as a result he had no real personality whatsoever. But again, this is the very early stage of the Vision. It could be that with this new Avengers formation, which includes the Vision, that we'll see more personality as the Marvel Cinematic Universe progresses, which I'm hoping for, because the Vision was a character that was basically constantly trying to grow as a human being, and so I guess as an android trying to become human. But the fact remains, of course, as we know, the Vision wields Thor's hammer, which was a really cool moment. I was expecting it to happen. Like, once that scene started to unfold, I said, okay, either it's going to be in this moment that he picks up Thor's hammer, either he's going to do it like absentee in the same way we saw Banner pick up the staff of Loki in Avengers, or he's going to do it consciously. He's simply going to pick up the hammer, and then people are going to be like, wow. And it was hilarious sitting in the theater, because when he picked up the hammer, people were just like, oh my god. Which was a huge moment. It was really fun. It was a reaction that I was hoping people would have, and I was really happy to see that reaction. But, you know, the fact remains that all in all, while it's not necessarily the most fluid of the Avengers films, while there is a lot of jumping around, while we really do just jump from one scene to the next, and it really just kind of, I guess a lot of things just kind of seem to be thrown in there, I thought it was a great movie. It was definitely interesting. Of course, I will buy it on Blu-ray and just to complete my Marvel Cinematic Universe collection. But you know, it was a movie that I would definitely, that I definitely enjoyed. So yeah, so that's my review. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comment section. And yeah, so I will catch you guys later. Peace.